I never thought a simple text message would shatter my world. But there it was, glowing on my husband's phone as I wiped down the kitchen counter after dinner. Miss you already. Same time next week? Emily. My name is Riley, and until that moment, I thought I had the life I'd always dreamed of. A successful career, a beautiful 3-year-old daughter, and Jake, my college sweetheart turned husband of 8 years. We weren't perfect, but we were happy. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. I stood there, frozen, Jake's phone still in my hand. He'd left it on the counter when he went to give Lily her bath, something he'd been doing more often lately. I'd thought he was just being helpful, stepping up as a father. Now I wondered if there was more to it. Mommy, Lily's voice echoed down the hallway. Come see my bubbles. Just a minute, sweetie, I called back, my voice steadier than I felt. I quickly placed Jake's phone exactly where I'd found it, careful not to disturb anything else. The sound of splashing and Jake's playful voice drifted from the bathroom. Look at all these bubbles, princess. You're going to turn into a mermaid. Lily's giggles felt like daggers in my chest. I pressed my palms against the cool granite countertop, trying to ground myself. Who was Emily? A coworker? A client? Someone else entirely? Hey, have you seen my phone? Jake appeared in the doorway, water spots darkening his gray t-shirt. His smile was the same one I'd fallen in love with years ago, but now it made my stomach turn. Oh, it's right there on the counter, I said, gesturing vaguely while busying myself with loading the dishwasher. Where you left it? Thanks, babe. He grabbed it, quickly checking the screen. I watched from the corner of my eye as his expression flickered, just for a moment, before returning to normal. Lily's asking for you. She won't let me wash her hair unless you're there too. I'll be right there. I managed to smile, but my mind was already racing ahead. Should I confront him now? Wait and gather more evidence? Tell someone? As I walked toward the bathroom, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was my best friend Mia. Girls' night tomorrow? I need wine and gossip. I typed back quickly. Definitely. We need to talk. Jake's voice called out again. Riley? You coming? On my way, I responded, taking a deep breath. I had no idea what I was walking into, both in the bathroom and in my life, but I knew nothing would ever be the same. The wine glass trembled slightly in my hand as I sat across from Mia at our favorite bar. 24 hours had passed since finding that message, and I'd spent every minute analyzing Jake's behavior like a detective searching for clues. He's been working late 3 times this week, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. That's never happened before. Mia leaned forward, her lawyer instincts kicking in. Have you checked your bank statements? Phone records? I haven't gone that far yet. I took another sip of wine. But this morning, he got a call during breakfast and went outside to take it. He said it was work, but I trailed off, remembering how he'd paced the backyard, gesturing animatedly. That's suspicious as hell, Mia declared. What about his mother? Has Helen noticed anything? She dropped by yesterday to watch Lily, and she definitely sensed something was off. You know how she is, those teacher instincts never really go away. I smiled weakly. She kept giving me these concerned looks, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her. My phone buzzed. A text from Jake. Working late again. Don't wait up. Mia saw my expression darken. What is it? I showed her the message. That's 4 times this week now. Riley, Mia said carefully. You need to? I know. I should confront him. I cut her off, then lowered my voice as a group passed our table. But what if I'm wrong? What if there's a reasonable explanation? And what if there isn't? Mia countered. What's your plan then? Before I could answer, my phone lit up again. This time it was Helen. Lily's asking for you. She seems upset. Maybe come home early? My stomach twisted. I'd been so focused on Jake, I hadn't noticed how our tension was affecting Lily. This morning, she'd barely touched her breakfast, something she never did. I have to go, I said, gathering my things.
Lily needs me.
Mia grabbed my arm. Promise me you'll do something about this. You deserve better than spending every night wondering. I nodded, but my mind was already racing ahead. Jake's office was on my way home. If he was really working late. Actually, I said, I think I will do something. Right now. Mia's eyes widened as she realized my intention. Want me to come with you? No, I need to do this alone. I squared my shoulders. But keep your phone on. As I walked to my car, another text came through from Jake. Might grab dinner with Mark after work.
Mark. Of course he'd be involved.
Jake's college friend had always been there, hovering at the edges of our marriage like a shadow. Something about him had always felt off, but Jake never saw it. I started my car, hands steady on the wheel. Time to find out what working late really meant. Jake's car wasn't at his office. I sat in my parked car across the street, watching employees filter out of the building as dusk settled. No sign of him or Mark. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. My phone buzzed. Helen, Lily's settled now. Take your time. I was about to head home when I spotted Mark hurrying out of the building, alone. He was talking on his phone, gesturing animatedly. Something made me roll down my window. Yeah, he's meeting her at Riverside Coffee again. Mark's voice carried across the quiet street. Don't worry, I've got his back. His wife doesn't suspect anything. My blood ran cold. Riverside Coffee was only 10 minutes away. I followed my GPS to the coffee shop, tucked away in a quiet corner of town. The kind of place you'd go if you didn't want to be seen. Through the window, I spotted Jake immediately, sitting in a corner booth across from a woman with auburn hair. Emily, I presumed. They weren't touching or acting romantic, but their conversation looked intense. Jake kept running his hands through his hair, something he only did when he was stressed. Emily reached across the table, not to hold his hand, but to pass him what looked like papers. My phone buzzed again. Mia, did you find anything? I started typing. At Riverside Coffee. Jake's herewith, but stopped when I saw Mark's car pull into the parking lot. He got out, straightening his tie, and headed toward the entrance. I ducked down in my seat, heart pounding. Through the window, I watched Mark approach their table. Jake's expression changed immediately, from vulnerable to guarded. Emily gathered her papers quickly, saying something that made Mark's face darken. As she stood to leave, Jake grabbed her arm, speaking urgently. She shook her head, pulled away, and walked out. Our eyes met briefly as she passed my car. She looked concerned. Mark sat down in Emily's vacant seat, leaning close to Jake. Whatever he was saying made Jake's shoulders slump. The same Jake who'd been so animated with Emily now looked defeated.
My phone rang, Helen again.
Riley, honey, I'm worried. Lily's asking questions about why Daddy's never home for bedtime anymore. I'll be home soon, I promised, watching Mark pull out his phone and show Jake something that made him pale. But I need a favor. Could you stay overnight? Of course, but...
And Halem.
I cut in, making a decision. Tomorrow, I need to tell you something. About Jake. As I ended the call, I saw Mark patting Jake's shoulder with what looked like sympathy, but his expression told a different story. Whatever was happening here went deeper than just Jake and Emily. And Mark was somehow at the center of it all. The morning after my coffee shop stakeout, I sat at Helen's kitchen table, watching her process everything I'd just told her. Outside, Lily played in the backyard, blissfully unaware of the adults' tension. I always knew something was off with Mark, Helen said finally, her hands wrapped around her coffee mug. The way he'd make those little comments at family gatherings, always comparing Jake's life to his own. What kind of comments? About promotions, money, success. Helen's expression darkened. Jake would brush them off, but I could see how they affected him. He started working longer hours after Mark became his supervisor last year. I nearly dropped my mug. Supervisor? Jake never told me Mark got promoted above him. Before Helen could respond, my phone buzzed. Mia. Found something about Emily. Call me ASAP. I need to take this, I said, stepping into the living room. Mia. What did you find? Emily Matthews, Mia said, her lawyer voice in full effect. She's not just any therapist. She specializes in workplace harassment and whistleblower cases. The pieces started falling into place. The papers at the coffee shop, Mark's threatening behavior, Jake's depression. There's more, Mia continued. 3 former employees from Jake's firm filed complaints last year. All cases were quietly settled, and guess who handled the settlements? Mark. Got it in one. And all 3 employees had met with Emily before filing. A crash from the kitchen interrupted my thoughts. I rushed back to find Helen staring at her phone, face pale. She wordlessly handed it to me. It was an email from the company's HR department, accidentally sent to her old work address instead of mine. I'd used it once for emergency contact information. The subject line, regarding Jake Harper's termination. They're firing him? I whispered. Read the whole thing, Helen urged. The email mentioned ethical concerns and financial discrepancies discovered by Mark Thompson. Jake was being accused of the very things I suspected he might be trying to expose. That manipulative bastard, Helen muttered, surprising me with her language. Mark's setting Jake up to take the fall for something. Lily's laughter floated in from outside, a stark contrast to the heaviness in the room. I watched her on the swing set, thinking about how much was at stake. Not just our marriage, but Jake's career, our family's future.
My phone buzzed again.
Jake, we need to talk. Not at home. Can you meet me? I showed Helen the message. She squeezed my hand.
Go.
I'll watch Lily. But Riley? Her eyes were fierce with maternal protection. Be careful. If Mark's involved, this could be bigger than we thought. I nodded, gathering my things. Whatever Jake was involved in, whatever truth lay behind Emily and Mark's role in all this, I needed to know. Not just for myself anymore, but for all of us. Jake was already waiting at our spot, the small park where he'd proposed 8 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. He sat on our bench, head in his hands, looking nothing like the confident financial analyst I'd known. I saw the termination email, I said, sitting beside him, but keeping my distance. And I know about Emily. His head snapped up. Riley, I can explain. She's a whistleblower attorney. I cut in. What I can't figure out is whether you're her client or her target. Jake let out a hollow laugh. Both, in a way. He pulled out a USB drive. Remember those late nights I've been working? I was gathering evidence. Mark's been running a scheme, cooking the books, hiding losses, pressuring employees to keep quiet. And you knew about this? I discovered it accidentally. Mark tried to make me complicit, said it would fast-track my career.
Zekas voice cracker.
When I refused, he started threatening me, using my friendship against me. Said he'd make it look like I was the mastermind. A jogger passed by, reminding me we were in public. The therapy sessions with Emily started as legal consultations, turned into actual therapy. The stress. He trailed off, looking at his shaking hands. I couldn't tell you. Mark had people watching us. He knew about Lily's preschool, your routine. I thought if I handled it alone. You were trying to protect us. I finished, the pieces finally clicking. But you pushed us away instead. I'm sorry, he whispered. I've made such a mess of everything. My phone buzzed, a text from Mia. Mark just filed official complaints against Jake. It's happening now. As I read the message, another text came through from Helen. Mark showed up at the house looking for Jake. Something's wrong. He seemed desperate. Jake saw my expression change. What is it? Before I could answer, a car pulled up to the curb. Mark stepped out, his usual polished appearance disheveled. Jake, he called out, walking toward us. We need to talk. Alone. I stood up, positioning myself between them. Actually, I think we all need to talk. Mark's facade cracked slightly. Riley, this doesn't concern you. My husband, my daughter, our future? I met his gaze steadily. It absolutely concerns me. Jake touched my arm, passing me the USB drive discreetly. Riley, maybe you should. No, I said firmly, gripping the drive. No more secrets. No more handling things alone. I turned to Mark. You've played us against each other long enough. Mark's expression darkened. You have no idea what you're getting into. Neither do you, I replied, pulling out my phone.
Mia?
We're ready. The look of confusion on Mark's face quickly turned to fear as police cars silently pulled up behind his vehicle. The police interview room felt colder than it should have. I sat across from Detective Sanders, watching her review the contents of Jake's USB drive. Outside, I could hear Mark's raised voice from another room, still maintaining his innocence. "Mrs. Harper," Detective Sanders said, "this evidence is compelling, but there's a problem." She slid a document across the table. "Mr. Thompson filed these papers yesterday. They implicate your husband in all of it." My hands trembled as I read. Mark had crafted a perfect narrative, using Jake's late nights and meetings with Emily as evidence of his supposed guilt. Every attempt Jake had made to protect us had been twisted into proof of his corruption. "Where's Jake now?" I asked, still in questioning. "Mrs. Harper, you should know. We found transfers to an offshore account in your joint names." My stomach dropped. "That's impossible. We don't have." "Created last month," she continued. "Mr. Thompson provided documentation showing your husband's authorization." The door opened. Mia rushed in, still in her courtroom suit. "Riley, don't say another word." She turned to the detective. "My client needs a moment." In the hallway, Mia's professional facade cracked. "It's bad, Riley. Mark's lawyers are pushing for immediate arrests. They're painting Jake as the mastermind and you as an accomplice." "What about Lily?" "My voice broke. Helen has her, but Child Protective Services has been notified due to the nature of the charges." The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as my world crumbled. Everything we'd done to protect our family had backfired. Jake's silence, my investigation, even Emily's help, Mark had anticipated and weaponized it all. My phone lit up with a text from Helen. "Lily keeps asking when you're coming home. What should I tell her?" Before I could respond, Jake was led past us in handcuffs. Our eyes met briefly, his filled with defeat, mine with helpless anger. Behind him, Mark walked free, escorted by his lawyers. "You did this to yourself, Jake," Mark called out. "Should have taken the promotion when I offered it." I stepped toward him, but Mia held me back. "Don't. It's what he wants." "Mrs. Harper," Detective Sanders emerged from the interview room. "We need to discuss your involvement. Your daughter's temporary custody arrangements will need to be." "No." I cut her off, something snapping inside me.
You don't understand.
Mark's not just destroying our lives. He's stealing from people's retirement funds, their futures. I pulled out my phone, showing her the text thread with Emily. "And I can prove it." Mark's smug expression faltered as I continued. Emily wasn't just Jake's therapist. She was gathering evidence from other victims, people too scared to come forward. Until now. The hallway fell silent as Detective Sanders read through the messages. But all I could think about was Lily, waiting at home, not understanding why her world was falling apart. Emily's testimony changed everything. I watched from the courthouse gallery as she methodically laid out Mark's scheme, supported by testimony from 3 other employees he'd threatened into silence. Jake sat at the defendant's table, finally free of handcuffs, while Mark's composure crumbled with each new revelation. "And this document," Emily held up a familiar paper, "shows Mr. Thompson creating the offshore account in the Harper's names, using forged signatures." Mark exploded. "She's lying. Jake was behind all of it. He's always been jealous of my success, my position." "Mr. Thompson," the judge warned, but Mark was unraveling. "I gave him everything." Mark pointed at Jake. "His career, his opportunities. He'd be nothing without me. And he repays me by trying to expose." He stopped, realizing his mistake. The courtroom fell silent. Even Mark's lawyers looked stunned. "Expose what exactly?" Mia stepped forward, her cross-examination voice razor-sharp. "The embezzlement? The threats against employees' families? Or how about the systematic manipulation of your supposed best friend?" I caught Jake's eye across the room. For the first time in months, I saw a glimmer of his old strength returning. "Would you like to revise your statement, Mr. Thompson?" Mia continued. "Perhaps start with explaining these messages to your offshore contacts?" Mark's face went ash-white as Mia produced printouts of his personal emails, emails I'd found buried in the company servers during late nights at work, using skills from my tech job that Mark had never bothered to learn about. You don't understand. Mark's voice cracked. Jake had everything handed to him: the perfect wife, the perfect kid, everyone's respect. I worked twice as hard, but he always. Objection. Mark's lawyer interrupted, but the damage was done. The judge called a recess, but I barely heard her. I was watching Mark finally face the truth, not just about his crimes, but about himself. The man who'd nearly destroyed our family out of envy was now destroying himself out of pride. Outside the courtroom, Helen waited with Lily, who ran straight into Jake's arms.
Daddy.
Are you coming home now? Jake looked at me, question in his eyes. We still had our own healing to do, our own truths to face. But watching him with our daughter, I remembered why I'd fought so hard to uncover the truth instead of seeking revenge. Yes, I said, joining their hug. We're all going home. Behind us, I heard Mark being led away in handcuffs, still protesting his innocence. But his words no longer had power over us. We had something stronger than his lies now: the truth and each other. 6 months after Mark's conviction, we celebrated Lily's 4th birthday in our backyard. The same space where Jake once paced during secret phone calls now echoed with children's laughter and music. Helen had outdone herself with decorations, and Mia arrived early to help set up, bringing Emily as her +1, a friendship that had surprised us all. I watched Jake leading a game of musical chairs, completely present in a way he hadn't been for so long. The therapy sessions had helped, but what really healed us was finally sharing our burdens instead of trying to protect each other from them. Mommy, look, Lily called out, proudly showing me a crown she'd made in art therapy. The past months hadn't been easy on her, but children are remarkably resilient when surrounded by love and honesty. It's beautiful, sweetheart, I said, adjusting it on her head. Just like you. As Lily ran off to join her friends, Helen appeared beside me. I got a letter from Mark yesterday, she said quietly. He's asking to see Jake. I tensed, but not as much as I once would have. What did Jake say? He hasn't decided. Helen watched her son helping Lily blow out her candles. But he's stronger now. Whatever choice he makes, it'll be for the right reasons. The party wound down as evening approached. Jake and I cleaned up while Lily showed Helen her new presents. Everything felt normal, peaceful, but not in the superficial way it had before. This peace was earned, tested, real. I've been thinking, Jake said, collecting paper plates, about taking that teaching position at the community college. I paused. Jake had been hesitant about leaving finance, even after everything. Are you sure? I want to help people avoid what Mark did to us. He smiled slightly. Emily thinks it's a good idea, using my experience to make a difference. Then do it, I said, touching his arm. We'll figure it out together. Later that night, after Lily was asleep, I found the old USB drive that had started everything. I'd kept it as evidence, but now it felt like a relic from another life. As I moved to throw it away, Jake stopped me.
Keep it, he said.
Not to dwell on the past, but to remember what we learned. I understood. Sometimes the best protection isn't in hiding the truth, but in facing it together. We'd learned that the hard way. Looking at Jake reading Lily her bedtime story, I realized that karma works in unexpected ways. Mark's attempt to destroy us had instead forced us to rebuild something stronger. Our marriage wasn't perfect. Nothing real ever is, but it was honest, resilient, and ours. And that was worth fighting for.